today we're talking about caring for someone who refuses help from anyone but you. Okay, so maybe that's your current situation. Maybe you kind of feel there's a little bit coming up ahead, or maybe you've been through that and found some ways through. We're really interested to hear some of the solutions there. It's a big topic. My name is Suzanne. I'm co-founder and head of carer support here at Mobilise. I'm also caring for my husband, Matt, who has young onset Parkinson's, and his mum now, we're sort of caring for as a family as she was diagnosed recently too. So yeah, and let me introduce my colleagues. I'm going to introduce all my colleagues today. So let me introduce Wace. Do you want to go first?
Yep. Hi everyone, I'm Awais. I'm also a carer and I'm based in Buckinghamshire. And I'll be dealing with the tech side of things today.
And my colleague Lucy's here with us as well today. Do you want to say hi, Lucy?
Hi everyone, I'm Lucy and I work in the carer support team, and I live in Somerset and have some caring responsibilities myself, and I also work part-time here.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I think it's going to be one of those sessions, guys. We're excited. So the topic today, and why does it matter? It's a really common topic that comes up in our community, and it's the sort of challenge that there's no simple answer for. You know, if this was an easy one, we would have answered it by now, as we commonly say. But it's challenging, you know, so let's tackle it together. That's what makes it a really great topic for the Mobilise lives and for the community. And so if we get our heads together, we may have some different ideas and some different things to try. Ultimately, though, why it's important, if we don't work through this, if we are the only person that someone else will allow to care for them, whether that be in the physical or the emotional sense, then there's a risk that we experience carer burnout. Normally, that might be then preceded by feelings of resentment or guilt. So maybe you're in that space already. And that can lead to a longer term impact on our health. So it really does matter. And it's quite often what we hear is the focus is on the person we're caring for. And yes, their needs and wants and preferences are hugely important, but so are ours. So sometimes we need to find a way to work through it, but we may just need to find a different solution. I'm also not here to create a change in your life that you don't want. If that's okay with you, that person is the only person, you're the only person they will accept care from, and that's okay with you, maybe the question is more about, if that's how the situation is, what other support can you put around you to make that situation more sustainable? So we'll look at that as well. But by the end of the event, my hope is that everyone feels empowered to step back and assess what we can and can't do now before we reach breaking point. Learn how to handle challenging conversations and set boundaries for the person we care for, and have some great creative thinking about the ways we can get more support. And hopefully along the way, you guys in the chat are already bringing it on, a little bit of uplift that, you know, it's a tricky topic. We could just sit here and look at all the bad sides of it and the difficult points as well. But hopefully we'll bring a little bit of uplift as well, even though we're going to look right at just how difficult this problem is. So I just want to come to you guys just to check in on what kind of situation either you've got personally or that you've seen. You know, I know you talk to a lot of people in the community. You're doing the one-to-one calls, the cuppers, you're there in the conversations in the community, just to have a sense of what kind of things are coming up. So Awais, what were the sorts of things that seem relevant to you there in this conversation?
For myself, from my experience, I'm currently a carer for my son. So my son has considerable health issues. So I'm already a carer for him, but I know I'm also an anticipatory carer for my parents, and it's getting quite close now. They're reaching that age. So my mom's recently had a knee replacement surgery. And again, getting that help is very difficult because I saw someone else mention in the chat that getting a woman would want a female carer to come in. So it's things like that, you know, even if it's a physio, even the support that they need to help them to recovery, my mom would most likely refuse that. She'd be like, oh no, just get me the plan and you guys can show me how it's done. So just even now in the early stages, it's quite difficult. And I would say somewhat it's a cultural barrier, but I think refusing help is not just cultural. I think while there's a massive cultural side to it for many of us where it's an expectation for your family to take part. But I think it's quite across the board, even in the UK. I think it doesn't matter what culture you come from. It's quite vulnerable, I think. It's a vulnerable position to be in, and I can see that from my parents, especially, and I think it would be for anyone. I mean, you live your life as quite independent, you're able to do so much, and then suddenly you're in a position where you need someone else's help, and that can be quite difficult.
Yeah.
And especially even when you're in a position getting help from your children, as a parent, you've always had to help them, and then suddenly you're in a position for them to help you, and then to then have to accept that from your children and someone from outside. I think that's a very vulnerable position to be in.
Yeah. I think it's really good to get kind of under the issue there, and on the sort of listening side of the person that you're supporting, that, you know, what's going on for them, what, you know, they're not just being difficult, you know, what's happening there. The feelings of vulnerability, I think, are so true. And yeah, but it's a big change as well in people's life, isn't it, actually? That sense of losing independence is a really worrying thing to face. And I think we never know when it's going to happen. It always happens sooner than we expected it to, really, doesn't it? We kind of just, particularly when it comes to our parents, we may just imagine them going on forever. And in Matt's parents' situation, 1 week his parents were helping us. The next week, life had changed so quickly, and his dad was in hospital and they needed support. So that it can, you know, there isn't always like an adjustment period to get used to that, but maybe knee surgery is a nice little testing out. But also interesting, sometimes they won't even accept help from someone who's professional and can definitely do it better than you. Like a physio program would definitely be better delivered by a physio than a member of the family, or, but sometimes that is the in, that actually they will take professional advice or professional input from someone that's an expert in something. So sometimes that's also the opposite, the opportunity for an in. Lucy, what about you? What kind of things are you seeing coming up in the community?
Yeah, well, when supporting carers, you know, in the sort of day-to-day work, it's not always like the physical aspects of caring. It can be, you know, when you're supporting someone, when you are supporting someone with a mental health condition, and the emotional burden that that has, because it might be what we see is for various reasons, the person with a mental health condition may refuse outside help, perhaps because the support in the past hasn't been appropriate or a positive experience. And so there's genuine, you know, based on that experience, there's a reluctance to bring that outside help in. And also it's about sort of protecting dignity as well, sometimes crops up, because maybe it's something that it's societal, you know, society won't accept, and so don't want people to know about their struggles. And so as the carer, they find themselves kind of emotionally burdened by being the only person that can provide that kind of emotional support. And so where do you go with that, you know, information? You know, you can absorb it, they absorb it and they're able to help, but then what about the carer, you know?
Yeah, and sometimes what you described there is kind of like double layered. First of all, they'll only accept that emotional support from one person. So that one person's got to do all of that and can't share it with anybody. But also they're asking for that one person to keep it all confidential and not discuss that with someone else. So then as the person supporting, you've not got that outlet or that way of processing all of that, or just pulling in a bit of extra support. And you may just be having to put on a brave face to everybody else. Life's fine here. I think when Matt was first diagnosed with Parkinson's, I think we did that for about a week. I think I'm quite a forceful person, and Matt's a very caring person towards me. But he said, I don't want to talk to anyone else about this. And that was just for a week. We just carried it on our own. And eventually I said, that's not going to work for me. I'm going to go crazy with this. I respect what you want. But, you know, we were in a position to be able to do that. And he was very trusting of a sort of small circle of friends and family that we could talk to about it. But it took me to say, I understand that's what you want, but that's not going to work for me. And, you know, but that was dealing with an adult who was also cognitively okay, and from lots of other respects, other than diagnosis, was doing okay.
And not everyone has that trusting circle around them.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's think about that. So that's what's happening. What impact does that have on us? If we're the carer and that's the situation, what impact does that have on us? So we talked a little bit about those emotional impacts. Lucy, what else do you think happens, have you seen happen for other carers in the community when they're holding all of this and there's no other choices?
Well, I mean, when the carer hasn't got an outlet for support, this sort of feelings of resentment and guilt can build up, and then you can end up in quite a bad situation yourself, and then not strong enough to be able to, you know, to care.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can build up over time as well. I think sometimes we can feel we're coping with it for a while, but it might not be sustainable. Awais, what else do you think? What other sort of impacts have you noticed on carers that are holding all of this sort of thing?
One of the impacts that I've noticed a lot of carers mention is where boundaries become blurred, and the cared for forgets what they can do. So yes, they need support, but they're so used to their carer doing everything for them, they forget to even do the basic things like, just getting up to pick up the remote. It could be something simple, and they'll ask the carer, "Can you pick up the remote for me?" Or, can you, things that they can still do, but they'll get so used to getting the carer to do them for them.
Yeah.
And then over time, the carer, rather than speak out and tell them you could do it, they think, oh, it's easier for me to just do it, rather than getting stuck into that argument. And then it becomes so normalized that they won't question it eventually, and it can lead to a burnout.
Yeah, and you can, that's it, just take on more and more without thinking about each stage. As we had to do that today, so now I just have to help with that every day. So the role becomes bigger and their independence shrinks. But that sits heavy on the carer again. It's me that's got to fight that or battle that. But there's something about choosing your battles, isn't it, as well? We can't be kind of putting up boundaries on every single thing every single day, but finding where those boundaries are and a comfortable way, a sort of realistic way of managing those as well can be helpful.
One carer also shared in the community about taking their partner to a day centre, and how he didn't want to get involved. And the other carers in the community, recommended that, she just go and enjoy it. If he wants to sit there, at least he's in a safe space, you can still keep an eye on him, but she can still do that. And that's when she realised, sometimes you can still do things with your cared for, but think of it from your perspective. So they're still getting the support that they need, but you also get a little break as well at the same time.
Also in the chat is carefuls not wanting to get help because they don't want to fund it when they feel like, it could be that a relative can do it for free. So why would we want to pay for that when actually, you can do it?
Yeah.
So,
the financial thing is a huge issue, isn't it? And depending on your background, it's not something lots of people talk about, how much money they've got and what they want to spend it on. So a lot of people don't have that expectation that might be a need at some point in their life to spend some of their own money on their care, or the benefits that they've accessed because of their care needs on that care. Sometimes there just isn't the money in the situation. That's very common, because just the whole caring situation can bring about, just higher expenses, etc. So, but it's a sensitive area, that one, isn't it, as well? That's a tricky one to navigate, but good to again do that listening to understand, is that the issue? And sometimes just, I think with that one, just playing through, well, what might happen if, and therefore if I give up work, how much income am I losing and how much pension am I losing, and things like that, sort of playing out the two scenarios in a sort of factual way rather than argumentative way can sometimes resolve that one. But it's, those are big things that we're up against, so it's kind of no wonder that we have these challenges. Brilliant. Okay, so now that we've had this kind of sense of where we're at and kind of what sort of stage and how important it's feeling and how urgent it's feeling, what can we do? Now, it can feel like we are completely trapped and there are no options other than just to accept it or wait for something to happen. That may be our reality. But let's have a go at thinking creatively and more broadly about the options. There may be opportunities when we realise that we're in areas where we can take control, make choices and make some changes. So I'm going to share some slides just to give you a little bit of thinking space for those of you in the chat there. Some questions to reflect on here. Is there someone we need to have a conversation with about this? Or who do we need to have a conversation with about this? What boundaries can we set? And another question here, what support do you need? And maybe there's some alternative types of support as well. For some of you, you'd already have thought about these things, but just, I know we're all at different stages. So maybe it's around some healthcare or personal care. Maybe that's somewhere someone would accept some support. Maybe around domestic chores, the cleaning, the gardening, the handyman stuff, the doing the shopping, lifts to places, those sorts of things. Would that be possible? Or maybe it's around different sort of people that for company. So maybe not be professional, but would they let someone else come in and just chat to them for a bit? A befriender, a phone call, whether it's from someone we know or from a voluntary service, Would they accept that kind of help? That may just give us half an hour break of not having to be in conversation with someone if someone else has got their attention. In person, trips out and things like that. Also things like daycare, those services really shut down for a lot over lockdown, but there are more services opening up now. If you explored it a couple of years ago, you may have reached a dead end. There may be things there, but that may not be right for someone, but worth exploring. And short-term respite as well, you know, just for one week a year, or 2 weeks a year, could you cope? And again, these things aren't always easy to find, but quite often it's the breakthrough of accepting that they might be an option. Or maybe it's practical. Maybe it's some equipment that might help so that you're not the one having to support them, lift them, etc. Or maybe it's double up caring. Would they let someone else come and care with you and alongside you? And I'd wonder whether that's a question that we kind of ask as well. But Lucy and Awais, anything else that you'd add to that? Awais?
I can't think of a personal experience because it's quite difficult in our culture to have these discussions with, with my parents. But as you remember, my landlord, who I mentioned, who's sadly passed away, Colin, one time I was visiting him and the carers would come in, they were sent by the hospital, and you know, they'd come in and talk to him and leave. But he didn't realize that he could ask them just to do extra things, a few extra things around the house, and you know, he had stuff to put away. And I said, you know, Colin, you can ask them to just do that if there's nothing else for them to do. He didn't even realize he could ask them to do that. So just to have that conversation with him, and then he texted me a week or so later saying, you know, thanks for telling him that, because he didn't realize it wasn't explained to him that he would get them to just do the few extra things that he's struggling with. He had that assumption that they've only come in for his health needs, not to help him with the other basic things around the house that they can help with. So
and normally the help's there to help someone to just thrive and stay safe and live a good life, not just to keep them well.
I think it's just having that discussion with, okay, if you don't want them to maybe physically touch you or help you in any way, what other things is there that they could help you with, which otherwise you need doing around the house that they could probably do for you? So I think it's sometimes just trying to approach it from a different angle, and then once the carer's there helping and they actually get to know them, they might slowly give in and be like, okay, maybe you can help me with this and help me with that, before they get used to the idea.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks. Lucy?
Yeah, it's kind of like sometimes about planting seeds and how you know, the clever thing of I'm not a psychologist, but helping someone think that maybe the idea or the suggestion comes from them rather than you. It's quite a hard one to manage, but it's often what we find is often it's about sort of control and feeling out of control. Because like maybe a change in circumstances, a loss of independence. So it's about you know, maybe coming round to an idea, not feeling it's thrust upon, approaching it maybe as a trial. You know, this isn't like this is what's going to happen now and forever, but a trial. And like you're saying, doing things in tandem and then gradually weaning, doing it very, very baby steps, really, really minute steps, and then gradually weaning them off you as the carer. And the other thing was mainly on a sort of related note was about the dignity of the person. And if you're the only one that's able to provide the personal care, that sort of reliance on you. So if you're ever not able to, you know, what alternatives can be put in place, and exploring that before perhaps a situation arises. But whilst maintaining dignity.
That's quite a nice approach to something. Like, we're okay for now, we're going to carry on like this, but hypothetically, if this were to happen, what could we explore? What might be the options is a good way to start that conversation. But also, Lucy, as you're talking there, obviously it depends on someone's cognitive level, whether these kind of approaches will work or not. We can't always have a conversation with the person either. It may just be their physical response to having help from somebody else, or they just shout out rather than be able to articulate that and explain it. So everyone's situation is so different. So let's come back to those difficult conversations. There's a couple of thoughts there about different ways we can approach it. Thinking hypothetically about another situation could be helpful. But for some people, particularly if the conversation is just not going anywhere, it's just turning into a bit of an argument or back around the same loop as before. This is from a piece of content that Mobilise we've created from our community. And this is what other carers have said helps. Pause and have a think if there's another way, and then try again. Okay? Try again. It's tough, isn't it? Think about the timing. If you want me to do something, don't ask me when I'm hungry. Sometimes those timing things can really matter, and different people will be open to different conversations at different time of the day. Some families will try and tackle this conversation at a big family event at Christmas or at someone's funeral or something, and it's just the timing's not right to try and get a joint solution there. There's another advice from carers: remaining assertive yet calm, and asking open, positively framed questions. Who could we accept some help from? In what situations would it be okay for someone else to help out? What would make it more comfortable for us to have some help from someone else? Just those sums, the we's, the little bits, the future can give a little bit of a fresh thinking. But again, it will depend on the cognitive the abilities of the person that you're talking to, or maybe you're discussing it with family who have strong opinions as well, people around this caring situation. So also we've talked about something difficult, so I promised some uplift. So as we land and as we end, just to think about what's next for you. We've had this conversation, and I think there's something to acknowledge here, that you've carved out the time to do this. Sometimes it can feel like there's never any time to think about this. You made the time to do this today, so acknowledge that. I don't know everybody's individual situation. It sounds, but I'm pretty sure that most of you are doing the best that you can and have done a lot already, have tried a lot of things, and maybe just acknowledge all those things that you've done and knowing that you are doing the best that you can. But thank you, everybody. Really lovely to see you. Thank you to my guests. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.